Hi, everyone. I'm Tiff O'Connell, and I'd like to welcome you to our January 24th, 2023 edition of O'Connell Law's Lunch and Learn, where you get to sit at your own desk or hopefully somewhere more comfortable, eat your lunch, and listen in on a topic we want you to know about. Because we limit this webinar to 30 minutes, please feel free to post any questions that pop up for you in the question and answer section at the bottom of your screen. Based on time, we'll get to as many questions as we can. Additionally, I may post some links to pertinent material for you in the chat box as we go along, so please feel free to watch for that. Also, please feel free to post in the chat box. I'll be monitoring both sections during this, and we really encourage you to ask questions as we go along. So with that, I would like to welcome my guest today, Marc Canner. Marc is an experienced real estate attorney who helps clients buy, sell, and finance real estate. He and his team work with buyers and sellers of real estate, as well as mortgage lenders, banks, and realtors to conduct real estate closings in an efficient and expert manner. His back-end operations create a boutique-type office structure to deliver outstanding real estate services. Marc has negotiated real estate transactions over the last 18 plus years. He is adept at managing the deal flow of a transaction in which he analyzes the real-time information in a deal and provides his clients with concise advice and strategy. Marc regularly speaks to real estate groups and teaches continuing legal education training programs to realtors and real estate attorneys. Prior to working as a real estate attorney, Marc served as an assistant district attorney in the Middlesex District Attorney's Office. In his capacity, he worked as a trial attorney and appellate attorney at Martha Coakley's liaison to Beacon Hill. Marc is a member of the Massachusetts Real Estate Bar Association. He received his bachelor's degree in 1993 from Lafayette College and his JD in 1998 from American University's Washington College of Law. So I asked Marc here today to talk with us because a lot of people are wondering, is 2023 the right year to actually buy property? And so, of course, we're talking about real property. And I know that we got a lot of interested folks registering for this. So I want to get started. So I am going to go ahead and post in the chat box both Marc and my contact information. So please feel free to follow with either of us afterwards for anything you might need. And with that, I would like to welcome Marc Canner. Marc, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tiff. It's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to today's topic. I appreciate the introduction.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you again for being available. So, all right, let's dive in and get started. So we are now in 2023. If someone's thinking about buying real property in 2023, should they be worried? I'm going to start off and just talk about the first thing that is kind of a buzz thing for people right now. And that's talking about the Fed rates increasing. Should people be buying property or what should they be doing?
Well, the rates have definitely increased. And as a result, I would say that it's a buyer's market, but with a wrinkle. There's three features in the market that we're seeing right now. One is there's less inventory. So folks that may have bought or refinanced and carry a rate of 4% or under, or most folks 3% or under right now. They're not anxious to list their property and then go and pay a higher interest rate on the new property. So as a result, there's less inventory. The price points remain relatively high, so there hasn't been any substantial drop in the property prices. There's slight drops in certain communities, but by and large, the price points are holding fairly steady compared to the 21 levels and 2022 levels. But the other feature, which is a plus for a buyer, is there's less competition for a buyer. So whereas in 2021, the start of 2022, a property would go or would be listed on the market, all of a sudden you would go to an open house and there'd be 50, 60, 70 people, and you'd be competing against a dozen offers or more. And you would have to, waive your home inspection, waive your mortgage contingency, et cetera. So we don't see that now. So there may be one or two offers on a property. So you can keep your home inspection contingency, and you also can have a mortgage contingency. So you're allowed to do, or you can do a lot more due diligence as a buyer in this market right now.
Yeah, and if you can just to kind of touch on, so if anyone happened to not be on planet Earth in the last few years to know, during that pandemic period, 2020, 2021, prices just went unbelievably sky high. And because of that and the demand, and I don't want to misspeak, so please, Mark, let me know if I'm misspeaking, but people ended up having to waive a lot more contingencies than they would normally, correct?
That's correct. So many buyers were waiving their home inspection contingency, and that's, you're rolling the dice. In New England, you have a lot of properties that are older, they get beat up over the years due to the weather, the changing conditions. So, if you're buying an older property, and you waive the home inspection, and there's a lot of issues that you're going to find out about after you take ownership, and there's a lot of additional expenses that you potentially could incur.
So you would not recommend waiving an inspection.
That's right.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. And in this market, you are able to have that home inspection, which is critical.
Good.
And the benefit of having the home inspection is you can go and negotiate. So you come back with a detailed home inspection, and there's an issue, with the HVAC or with the roof or with with the basement. You can go back and ask for the seller to repair the item. You can ask for a credit. You can ask for a price reduction. And if you have less competition, there's no limited number of other buyers out there, you have the leverage to negotiate that. So the leverage is shifted to the buyers in that negotiation. And oftentimes it's the agent, so it's your realtor, who negotiates the home inspection.
Got it. Does it and I guess the most severe that would be if it turns out that the home inspection is a disaster, it would give someone a way to back out.
That's right. Yep. So you have an out, and you can get your deposit refunded.
Okay.
So in the home inspection, on the closing timeline occurs between the offer and the purchase and sale agreement. So at offer, buyers typically put down anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. When in 2021, 2022, when it was a hot market, buyers were putting down huge down payments with their offer. So we saw 50,000, 100,000 or more with an offer. So if you put down $1,000 or even $5,000, you still have the leverage, because if you're walking away and you just have $1,000 on the table, most of which you typically can get back, and again, as a buyer, you have the leverage in the negotiation. The full 5% is not due until the purchase and sale agreement is signed. So you don't have to put down the bulk of the deposit until you've moved past the home inspection.
Got it. And then just to touch on, for those that might be curious on this, you also mentioned, I believe, having the mortgage contingency as part of the agreement. And so the idea being that if the mortgage doesn't come through, or what does that mean? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So in the closing timeline, you submit your offer, and then you sign the P&S, and then between P&S and closing, you'll have a mortgage contingency. It's usually 2 to 3 weeks after the P&S is signed. And that the mortgage contingency is essentially comprised of 2 items. One is the lender underwriting you. So they're underwriting your assets, your employment, your financials, and then they also appraise the property. So they want to make sure the property comes out at the appraised value.
Got it. And you'd recommend, though, that people still go get pre-approved prior to going
you still need a pre-approval letter. That's just the sort of the initial stage. The mortgage commitment means the lender's going to underwrite your file. So that's a more detailed review, and that happens again 2 to 3 weeks after the purchase and sale agreement. So if you have that mortgage contingency, and for some reason the lender just can't underwrite your file, the guidelines have tightened up right now a bit, then you have the ability to get your deposit refunded. So you have much more many more protections in place right now.
Got it. And so, and that in a way kind of helps with that buyer's market, again, with you said, with some of the wrinkles that we were talking about.
Correct. Yep,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
So now let me ask you about the Fed rate. How is that impacting? Is it?
So there's two rates. So one is the Fed rate. So the Fed rate is in the news, and there's always a discussion that the Fed rate could be increased. The next meeting of the Federal Reserve is January 31st and February 1st. And, the Wall Street Journal, some of the other financial publications have recently discussed what's going to occur. There's a discussion that the Fed could raise rates anywhere from 25 to 50 basis points. The mortgage interest rates also, they tend to follow the Fed rate, but not exactly. So the mortgage interest rates are based on different factors. And it's a little bit more complicated in what the mortgage interest rates are based upon. So essentially there's three pieces to what a mortgage interest rate is based on. And one is the 10-year bond. So the mortgage market tracks the bond market. The second piece of the mortgage-backed securities, which is when lenders bundle their mortgages and then sell them on Wall Street. And then the third piece is the interest amount that the lenders charge, which reflects their profit.
Okay.
So each of those factors go into determining the mortgage interest rate, and they're often set in advance of the Fed rate. So it's a little bit different.
Okay.
And Tiff, if I could, one qualifying or one disclaimer, I'm not a loan officer. I'm just an attorney. So, everything that I'm providing today is just sort of what I've gleaned from the popular press, from the financial press. I would urge the participants to talk to a mortgage loan officer for specific information on the mortgage interest rates. So that's my disclaimer.
No, I think that's very appropriate. So, and as always, for these lunch and learns, this is for informational purposes. You should always do your due diligence whenever you're doing anything. So with that, I also want to kind of touch on, and again, I acknowledge that you're not a mortgage loan officer, but I do want to ask this because this is kind of in the news right now, where there's talk about the debt ceiling. Does that impact anything, or how's that relate?
So the debt ceiling could negatively impact the mortgage market and the financial markets if the debt ceiling is breached. So if the US government were to default, which is a long way away, but if that were to happen, that's sort of the nuclear scenario. So then there's discussion in the popular press that the interest rates could really bump higher, and they could go into, they could be 2 or 3 points higher than what they are right now, which would have a dampening effect on the real estate market. So very important for the real estate market and for other sectors of the economy that there's a deal reached on the debt ceiling. Got it.
And how are banks that loan for mortgages liking this environment? Are more banks getting into the market because of this? Are they getting out? What's happening?
So many banks are getting out. So some of the bigger banks, Wells Fargo just rolled back their mortgage lending. A lot of the bigger banks are challenged in this environment because there's not as much volume. So their staffing levels were set up in 2021, 2022 for higher volume. So just like in other areas of the economy, like in technology, et cetera, we're seeing layoffs in some of the bigger banks. So that sector is definitely negatively impacted by the higher rates. There are still, many local lenders, mortgage brokers here in Massachusetts that have their, core staff intact that are willing and able to lend. And we're certainly happy to provide a list of mortgage brokers and lenders after this webinar,
right,
if anyone wants to follow up.
Wonderful. And again, you'll find Marc's contact information in the chat box. So please definitely take a look at that. And actually, I'm just going to pause because we actually already have a question. So let me ask you that. So here is the question that got asked. What protections do I have if I contract with an individual builder to purchase a house he is in the process of building? He is a builder who buys individual plots of land and builds homes on them.
So if you are buying new construction and the property is not yet built, you need to be under contract. So if you've signed an offer, the offer has the key terms, the purchase price, the closing date, the property address, and in essence, you're under contract. So as a result, the builder has to sell to you. The offer will list specific timeline when the purchase and sale agreement needs to be signed. So once the PNS is signed, then you have a completed contract. And in Massachusetts, a seller cannot walk away from a contract. So the court would enforce the sale of a contract if the seller tried to sell for a higher price to a different buyer. So you're in full contract as long as you have a fully signed offer and then followed up by a subsequent purchase and sale agreement.
Got it. So now we're going to shift a little bit. And so I can't believe we're already about halfway through this. So that said, now I've decided I want to buy, right? It's 2023. I made the decision. I'm going to buy. What should I consider? So I want to break it into two. Talk about what would normally happen, period, if you're buying, whether it's investment or residential, some general thoughts. And then to kind of, I know that we said we wanted to talk about investment, but I think a lot of the folks here too would be interested in the residential side. So Marc, I know that was a big open wide question.
Sure.
But discuss.
Absolutely. So just step by step. So the first piece of the puzzle is to get an agent. You really need to add a buyer's agent to your team. And the agents bring a lot of value to the transaction, and they do a very nice job negotiating the home inspections. We've seen many deals where there's no agents involved in the transaction unravel during the home inspection negotiation. So an agent is an effective buffer in the negotiation with the seller or with a listing agent when you're dealing with the home inspection, and can add substantial value. So the first step is to obtain to select your buyer's agent, and then you'll go out and look at properties. And then once you're ready to make an offer, you submit it, you'll work with your lender. So you're going to reach out to the lender, get your pre-approval, and then submit your offer. If the offer is accepted and you're under agreement, then the attorney becomes involved in the transaction and joins the team. So you'll have your agent, your lender, and your buyer's attorney as part of your team.
Okay.
So that's the first piece.
So what's the second piece?
The second piece is the transaction itself. And the timeline of the transaction, again, it's the offer, the purchase and sale agreement, the mortgage contingency, and then the closing. So you work essentially with the attorney on the legal documents, and then the lender on the financing side.
Okay. Got it. And so now anything specific, and let's start with the residential, because that's kind of the foundational, right? Pretty much the first thing someone's going to do before they buy investment property is buy residential property. So what if someone's interested in buying a residential property this year? Anything special knowing those conditions?
Again, I think just to circle back to what I initially touched on, just beware of the market. We have the factors that include the less inventory. So there's less properties that you're going to be able to look at. And the price points are going to start out relatively high. But again, you're going to have more power to negotiate because you're going to have less competition, which is the third factor. So when you do go out and look, you have to understand that as the buyer, you're going to have much more leverage in this market.
Got it. Now, what about if I'm going out and buying an investment property?
Investment properties right now also have the same structural issues as residential properties in that market, which is there's much, I should say there's limited inventory. So you're gonna have to go out and look carefully. If you do find a property that you like, you're going to find that the financing is a little bit more difficult than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So the rates are going to be higher. So interest rates on investment properties generally are 1 to 2%, or pardon me, 1 to 2 points higher than on residential properties.
Got it. And then just kind of curious on this, because, thinking back to the pandemic like say a few years ago, I mean, we're honestly still in a pandemic, but that said, we're kind of more stabilized for everyday activity. So knowing that, I wonder, I was interested in you saying there's not much commercial property out there, because what's happening with these businesses? Aren't they kind of saying we don't need as much space, or are you finding that businesses are, no, we want space?
The commercial property sphere is also limited right now. So
Okay.
there's a bit less inventory. So it's similar dynamics. If you're getting commercial financing on an investment property, that also the financing is going to cost a little bit more this year. And it's going to be priced higher than the residential investment property financing,
Okay.
and higher than the residential property financing as well.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Now, I've heard the term jumbo loans before. Mark, what does that mean? Is that important to know about in this market?
Yeah, so very good question. So there's two types of loans. One is there's conforming loans on a residential loan, and then there's jumbo. And the cutoff is $726,200. So if your loan amount is above $726,200, you're eligible for a jumbo loan. And it's counterintuitive, but jumbo loans carry lower interest rates.
Okay.
It's likely because they there's more higher in, or you start over. The loan amounts paid each month, it's back to the lender a little bit more. The amortization schedules are a little bit, or they're more appealing for a lender. So, so therefore the rates are a bit lower. And there's a few lenders that specialize in jumbo loans as well. So you're going to have the ability as a consumer to shop and to find a more apt or more appealing pricing.
Okay.
There's also, in addition to standard 30-year fixed, and again, I don't want to get too in front of my skis because I'm not
Right.
A loan officer, and someone needs to talk to the loan officer or the mortgage lender about this. But there's various products at play: adjustable rate notes versus fixed notes of 30 years. So some of the pricing for the adjustable rates is typically more appealing.
Okay. Got it. Got it. So now we have probably about 6 minutes left before it's time to wrap up. So knowing that, I want to shift to the last topic that we wanted to talk on, and that's you've made the decision to buy, how to protect yourself when you're buying a property. I know we talked about definitely make sure you've do an inspection, make sure you have the mortgage contingency clause, but what are other things that people should be thinking about in order to protect themselves?
Sure. Good question. So let's start out on the investment side. So if you're buying an investment property or you own an investment property, a lot of the books and topical materials say you should own in an LLC. There's a big problem with that, though. If you have a mortgage on the property, there is a due on sale clause in the mortgage, which says that you have to notify the lender of any transfer or change in the interest in the property. And if you don't, then the lender can call in the note and essentially move to foreclose. So you have to be very careful about transferring property from your name into an LLC. I always advise just keep it in your name. The lenders will charge a lower rate. It's generally 1 to 2 points higher if you want to buy in an LLC. And then if you keep it in your name, you can obtain an umbrella insurance policy. And an umbrella insurance policy basically covers any kind of loss or damage at the property. So if there was a slip and fall case or any kind of lawsuit by a tenant against you as the landlord, your umbrella policy could cover that. And you could speak with an insurance agent for the pricing, but the pricing is relatively low on an umbrella policy.
Correct. So knowing that, and there's just a couple of things I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper on for that. And you and I both agree definitely on the LLC. So, I mean, Mark, you'd agree that there are times when an LLC is appropriate, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
there are certain circumstances.
But so many people think that's what it should absolutely be every time you buy an investment property. And no, it may not be what's the best and that best for that person.
That's right. And the way the lender would find out if you move the property into an LLC after you've already owned is through the home insurance. So the lender needs a copy of the home insurance binder each year. So If the home insurance binder remains in your name as an individual, but the deed reflects you own as an LLC, well, you've just invalidated your homeowner's insurance. So if there's a claim and there's the wrong ownership name and it doesn't match up, the insurance company is not going to pay the claim. So it's the insurance that trips it up. So you have to be very careful as an investment property owner.
And thank you for mentioning that, because I think, I was trying to put myself in the position of someone that might not understand how all this works and say, oh, well, then I just won't let my homeowner insurance carrier know. And it's like, oh, no, because if you have a loss and the right owner is not listed, they may not pay at all.
Correct.
And so it's crucial to make sure that you update your homeowner insurance carrier whenever you make a transfer.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Another option, which maybe you could speak to, Tiff, is transferring to a trust.
That's
the effective option.
Exactly, because, and thank you, Mark, for bringing that up, because it really, from an estate planning end, so again, my disclaimer is I'm talking about from estate planning end, is that sometimes an LLC is appropriate. But again, we have to be careful and talk to someone like Mark and others to make sure that we're not running afoul of anything for purposes of that. But sometimes we will use an LLC where it is appropriate. But another thing, Mark, that I just want to mention that I think a lot of people forget about is when you have an LLC, you also have the filing fees every year, in addition to the setup of the LLC. And then you may have tax implications in addition to that. So there's so many reasons why an LLC may not be the proper thing in your particular circumstances, but just touching on trust. And so thank you for that little segue. When someone transfers their property to a revocable trust, so a trust that begins with an R, so meaning you could revoke it, that's still you for purposes of taxes or ownership or anything. So as estate planners, we can transfer a property to a revocable trust. We still do need to notify the mortgage carrier we're doing it, but there's actually a federal law that protects someone called the Garn-St. Germain Act, which says as long as you've let the mortgage company know, you're allowed to do it, because you're really just transferring it to you. You're not transferring it to someone else. So therefore, if the mortgage company ever wanted to collect, they could still collect because it's still you. Transfer to an LLC or transfer to an irrevocable trust, the mortgage carrier doesn't like that because that makes it hard for them to collect if someone doesn't pay. That's why they don't like it.
That's right. They can't, much harder to foreclose.
Right. And so because of that, it's making sure you're just following what the rules are. And so making sure you've got a real estate attorney involved, making sure that if you're doing it for estate planning purposes, you have an estate planning attorney that knows what they're doing. Because also as part of even putting into a revocable trust, we still need to notify the homeowner insurance carrier for the reasons that Mark and I were talking about before, to make sure that coverage remains proper. But yeah, I mean, it is possible, but you've got to make sure you've got the right people guiding you through that. We too love umbrella insurance. Umbrella insurance, I think, is a wonderful thing really for anyone to have that has ownership in an auto and real property. I think it's a slam dunk.
And the cost of an umbrella policy essentially is the same or sometimes slightly more than what the filing fee is annually for the LLC. So essentially you're just swapping the umbrella coverage for the LLC filing fee. So
right. So okay, so Mark, rapid question for you because we have less than 1 minute. Are you ready? Here's another question. All right, a question about purchasing from an individual builder. How big of a risk is a builder going bankrupt or otherwise walking away from the house under construction? How can I protect myself or mitigate the risk of that happening? By the way, I'm going through a real estate agent.
Sure, good question. So your deposit goes into an escrow account or it should go into an escrow account. So when you review the contract, you want to make sure that the deposit's not being held in the seller's personal bank account. If the seller were to go bankrupt under those circumstances, then you know, good luck getting your deposit back. If it's in an escrow account, then regardless of the seller's status, if the seller doesn't complete the project and the deal terminates, then you'll get your deposit refunded.
Got it. Got it.
So if the seller has a listing agent or a seller's attorney, it should be held in their bank account. And Steve, I'm looking at your question. You can feel free to follow up with me offline. I'm happy to answer any additional questions on this project for you.
Wonderful. So with that and hitting the half an hour mark, it is now 12:30. Marc Canner, thank you so much for coming and talking with me today. I really appreciate it. And thank you as well to all those listening in. I noticed that no one signed out during this whole thing, so I think it was an interesting topic for people. So thank you for listening in. Please, as always, watch for future email announcements on upcoming lunchtime webinars that we will be having. And as always, I hope you all have a good rest of the week. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Tiff, and thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.